Hello! This video is on commas, how to use commas. Before you watch this video, you need to watch the simple, compound and complex video that I created. This is because we're going to use some terms that are explained in that video. So, if you have not watched the simple, compound and complex sentences video yet, please click on the eye here in the corner to watch it. And once you have watched it, come back to us. Commas. Commas are the punctuation marks that are often misused. It's one of the most misused punctuation marks. People struggle with it. So why do we struggle with commas? Well, there are different types of commas. Some people say we have to use commas for this, other people say we have to use commas for that, and other people disagree. So it's not as straightforward. However, there are some rules. And some rules you need to use for your sentence to make sense. You may have heard the difference between let's eat, comma, grandma, compared to let's eat grandma. So when I say let's eat grandma without a comma, here you're saying that we're going to eat grandma. Grandma is our dinner. But if I say let's eat, comma, grandma, here you invite grandma for a meal. So the difference here is without a comma, you get the impression that you're going to eat grandma. Let's eat grandma. She's our dinner. But with a comma, you're actually saying, no, grandma is not our dinner. We are inviting grandma for dinner. Let's eat, comma, grandma. So commas are used to clarify the meaning of sentences. And that's probably the most important thing you need to keep in mind. Is commas are there to help the reader. To help the reader read your text. If you use commas properly, then the reader of your text will not have any difficulty understanding your message, your points, your ideas. Your text will flow well. So now, let's have a look on some rules about commas. Let's start with a simple one. A list. A list of 3 items or more. Look at these 2 sentences. To work from home, I need a new desk, an office chair, a computer, 2 monitors, a keyboard, and a mouse. Without a comma. The same one with commas. To work from home, I need a new desk, comma, an office chair, comma, a computer, comma, 2 monitors, comma, a keyboard, and a mouse. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the one without commas or the one with commas? Most people will tell me, I prefer the one with commas. Why? Well, because the commas clearly tell me where the items are. They clearly mark off each item from the list. So that sentence with commas clarify where the items of the list are. Do not even put a comma between keyboard and the word and. No commas before and. Now, it's not really wrong as such to put a comma before and. It is possible, although nowadays it is frowned upon. More people would say you don't need a comma before and, so why having one there? Get rid of it. No commas. 2 different types of school here. Some say you need one, others you don't need one. Both of them are correct. But the tendency today, actually in the UK compared to America, in the US, they will put a comma before and. In the UK, we are like, we don't really need it, so we don't use it. So it's more common not to use a comma at the end of a simple list. Before and. Before the word and. I'm talking about a simple list here. Now, I mentioned a list of 3 items or more. That's because a list of 2 items, you don't need commas. With a list of 2 items, just no commas at all. You can just say, I would like to go to the cinema and the fair. I would like to go to the cinema and the fair. We don't need a comma there. 2 items no commas are needed. Usually use the commas 3 items or more. But there's always an exception somewhere. So here is our exception. I say a simple list. With a simple list, you don't have to use a comma before and. But when the list is not as simple in that the items are quite long, then commas or not. Well, let's compare again 2 sentences. During our visit in Chile, we would like to see the penguins off the coast of Punta Arenas at the Isla Magdalena, trek to the glaciers of the world-renowned national park of Torres del Paine, and visit the spectacular marble caves under the Lago Carrera General. So you got a sentence here with all the commas, including one without and, another sentence with all the commas, excluding before and. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the sentence with a comma before and, or do you prefer the sentence with no comma before and? Now, a lot of people will say that we need a comma before and here, because the items of the list are quite long. It's not really, 1 or 2 words. It's quite wordish. And we probably need to have like a break beforehand. So most people would say use a comma here. So this is how to use commas in a list. Having said that, a list could be more complex, more complicated. And in this case, we have to look again at the use of commas. This is an international company that has offices in Berlin, Germany, Santiago, Chile, Bangkok, Thailand, and Pretoria, South Africa. So this is our sentence. Now, let's have a look at another way of using a punctuation mark here. This is an international company that has offices in Berlin, Germany, semicolon, Santiago, Chile, semicolon, Bangkok, Thailand, semicolon, and Pretoria, South Africa, full stop. Now my first sentence here only has commas. My second sentence here has commas and semicolons. Which one do you think is better? First one with only commas, or the second one with commas and semicolons? I bet you're going to say the second one. The second one is probably much better, and I would say, not probably, it is certainly much better. So why is the second sentence with the semicolons much better than the first one with just commas? That's because of our items, the way our items are presented. The problem with our items is it is made of a city and a country. That's our terms, city, country. So items have a comma within it. Berlin, Germany. So using commas to separate our items made of city and country doesn't help to mark off our items at all. Using the semicolons, however, to separate each items made of city and country clearly mark off our items, much easier to read. We can clearly see that our items here is Berlin, Germany. First item. Second item, Santiago, Chile. Third item, Bangkok, Thailand. Pretoria, South Africa. So you can see here how the semicolon helps us with marking off our items. So this is an exception where you have to use semicolons to separate each item of our list. You have to think of the reader. Have the reader in mind. Will the reader understand my sentence if you just put commas? Or will it help the reader if I put semicolons instead? There's another example where items actually are not as straightforward and more complex, and again you have to use semicolons. Let's have an example of different types of items here. Again, I give you the same 2 sentences, one with just commas, another one with semicolons. We need to update the following policies. Safeguarding, health and safety, comma, equality, diversity and inclusion, comma, and data protection. Let's have a look at the sentence again, but with semicolons. We need to update the following policies. Safeguarding, semicolon, health and safety, semicolon, equality, comma, diversity and inclusion, semicolon, and data protection. So which sentence do you prefer here? Again, do you prefer the sentence with just commas, or first one? Or do you prefer the sentence with semicolons, or second one? Well, personally I think that the second one is clearer than the first one. And that's because, again, our items are a bit more complex and they are not simple words. On top of having an item with a comma, equality, comma, diversity and inclusion, we also have the word and in it. Diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion. Our and here doesn't mean that what goes after and is our last item at all. What goes after and is not our last item in diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion is the full title of the policy. The semicolon here clearly indicates where our policies are, the names of the policies, and then mark off clearly the names of our policies. One is called safeguarding, another one is called health and safety, another one is called equality, diversity and inclusion, and the last one is called data protection. I do not, but before and, there is a semicolon. Here, you need to use a semicolon before and. So, to sum up, here, you use commas to mark off each item of the list. If the list is simple, one or two words, then it is straightforward. If, however, the items of the list are more complex, then you may need to use semicolons to mark off your items. Have the reader in mind. Always have the reader in mind. Is your list clear with only commas or not? And if your list is not clear with only commas, then would it be clearer with semicolons separating your items? Keep that in mind. Now, let's move on to another topic, the coordinating conjunctions. How do we use coordinating conjunctions? Commas with coordinating conjunctions. As a reminder, and I hope you have watched the video on simple, compound, and complex sentences, because that video explains in more in-depth what coordinating conjunctions are. But as a reminder, there are 7 of them. We use the acronym FANBOYS, F-A-N-B-O-Y-S, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. FANBOYS. So these FANBOYS conjunctions are coordinating conjunctions. What do we do with them? Well, coordinating conjunctions are used to link two independent clauses. An independent clause stands on its own. That's why they are called independent. They don't depend on another clause. They are independent. They stand on their own. So I could have a sentence like, I would love to eat a chocolate cake. I would love to eat a chocolate cake stands on its own. I can also have, I am on a diet. I am on a diet stands on its own. But then I can link these two independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction. Like, but I would love to eat a chocolate cake. But I am on a diet. But here links our two independent clauses. And we use a comma before the coordinating conjunction. So we would write, I would love to eat a chocolate cake, comma. But I am on a diet. You could also have that with long clauses, like, I recommend that you use sun cream to protect your skin, comma. And I would like to add that you need to drink more water. Now, and here links my two clauses that do not, that before I mention lists and I mention that you don't really need to use a comma before and in a simple list. And here I'm like, use a comma before and. But that's because here in my example, it's not a list. I recommend that you use sun cream to protect your skin. And I would like to add that you need to drink more water. I don't have a list here. My and here links two independent clauses. That's the difference. So use a comma before a coordinating conjunction. But as I mentioned in the video on simple, compound, and complex sentences, do be careful because the function of the word depends on how it is used. For example, the word for, F-O-R, yes, could be a coordinating conjunction. I said could be because it could be something else depending on how it is used. It could be a preposition. And really, you would use for more often as a preposition rather than as a conjunction. So for as a preposition, you would not necessarily use a comma before. So when I say, I have made this cake for my sister, in here, I have made this cake for my sister, I've got only one clause. Just one. One independent clause. I don't have two clauses. So for here is not linking two clauses because for is within a clause. There is just one clause. For here introduces what we call a noun phrase. My sister. My sister is what we call a noun phrase. Sister is a noun, and a noun phrase is made of a noun with anything that is linked to the noun. My is linked to the noun. My is linked to sister. So my sister, the two of them together form a noun phrase. And for here introduces my noun phrase. For here is what we call a preposition. Preposition. So for here is not a conjunction. I don't need a comma in that sentence. I have made this cake for my sister. The only punctuation mark needed is the full stop at the end and capital I. That's it. No commas in that sentence, no need. Because for my sister, for here is a preposition, is not a conjunction. So keep that in mind. Now, as I use comma before coordinating conjunctions, but you know, as usual, we've got an exception. What can I say? There are some situations when we don't use commas with the coordinating conjunctions. And that, to start with, when the clause is short. Very short. Like, the garden is lovely and the flowers are in full bloom. In the garden is lovely and the flowers are in full bloom, my clauses are short. I mean, the garden is lovely, very short clause. The flowers are in full bloom is another short clause that I link with and. So because these two clauses are short, we don't need to use a comma before and. Having said that, it doesn't hurt to put a comma before and. You've got a choice here. Another example. Marie Curie coined the term radioactivity and discovered two new elements. Right. Here is a bit different from my first example. Well, the difference is where the subject is. What do I mean by that? My example regarding the garden and flowers. When I say the garden is lovely, the subject is the garden, and the garden is lovely. When I say the flowers are in full bloom, the subject is the flowers. Flowers in the flowers are in full bloom. Now, let's have a look at our clauses here with Marie Curie. Marie Curie coined the term radioactivity and discovered two new elements. We've got two clauses here. We've got Marie Curie coined the term radioactivity, first clause. And the second clause is discovered two new elements. Well, when I say discovered two new elements, I mean Marie Curie discovered two new elements. So our second clause, the subject is Marie Curie again. Marie Curie discovered two new elements. So our two clauses here, Marie Curie coined the term radioactivity and the clause Marie Curie discovered two new elements, they share the same subject. Marie Curie is the same subject for these two clauses. So when you merge these two clauses into one sentence, you don't have to repeat the subject Marie Curie for the second clause. You can say Marie Curie coined the term radioactivity and discovered two new elements. You don't need to repeat Marie Curie in the second clause. So because these two clauses share the same subject, Marie Curie, then we don't use a comma before and. So that's another thing. When you have two clauses, and these two clauses share the same subject, the subject being with the first clause, then you don't use a comma. Another example when commas are not needed is with neither nor or either or. Neither my sister nor my parents knew that I sold my car. Neither my sisters nor my parents knew that I sold my car. You don't need a comma with either nor. And it's true as well with either or. You get either the pizza or the curry, but not both. And you'll get either the pizza or the curry, but not both. You don't need a comma at all with any of them. Even when I've got but here, because but here, a clause, not both, doesn't have a subject and a verb. The subject and the verb is, for not both, you will, not you will. You will not get both. So when I say you get either the pizza or the curry, but not both, I mean you get either the pizza or the curry, but you will not get both. If I haven't repeated, you will not get, I mean it's, the will not get is, you get either or, a bit complicated, it's in there, but I haven't said after but, you will not get. So because I haven't said after but, you will not get, then I don't need a comma there. I will need a comma if I did say, but you will not get both. So if I say, you get either the pizza or the curry, comma, but you will not get both. But if I just say, but not both, no comma with but not both. So this is commas with co-ordinating conjunctions. Now, co-ordinating conjunctions are not the only type of conjunctions. There is another type of conjunctions called subordinating conjunctions. Subordinating conjunctions link two clauses. They link an independent clause with an dependent clause. So independent, dependent. Because the dependent clause depends on the independent clause. In other words, a dependent clause cannot stand on its own. If I say, that's it. If I say is a dependent clause. Because when I just say, if I say cannot stand on its own. You need something else for if I say to make sense. So because if I say cannot stand on its own, it's not an independent clause. It is a dependent clause. If I say, the meaning of if I say depends on the meaning of another clause, the independent clause. Right. If is a subordinating conjunction. There are many subordinating conjunctions. I cannot give you an exhaustive list of it. There are just too many. What I would say is, if it's not a coordinating conjunction, then it is a subordinating conjunction. As simple as that. Okay? If you've got a word linking two clauses, and that word is not one of the fine boys coordinating conjunctions, then it is a subordinating conjunction. As simple as that. Now, compared to coordinating conjunctions, we don't usually use a comma before a subordinating conjunction. For example, I am not going out because the weather is awful. Because the weather is awful is a dependent clause, cannot stand on its own. It needs I am not going out for it to make sense. But we don't need a comma there. Wear warmer clothes when it is cold. When it is cold is again a dependent clause that depends on the meaning of wear warmer clothes. When it is cold, cannot stand on its own. No commas needed for these two sentences. Now, I mentioned coordinating conjunctions. I mentioned that for example, could be a coordinating conjunction or a preposition, depending on when it is used in the sentence. Now I'm going to mention something else. The word so. So has the particularity to be, depending on the situation, a coordinating conjunction or a subordinating conjunction. Yes, we've got one of these. So, as far as I know, the only one. It could be both coordinating or subordinating, depending on how it is used. If so has the meaning of therefore, then it is a coordinating conjunction. If so has the meaning of so that, then so here is a subordinating conjunction. So if you use so as a coordinating conjunction, you need to use a comma before so. But if you use so as a subordinating conjunction, then you don't need a comma. Simple, isn't it? For example, the fridge is empty, so I need to go shopping. The fridge is empty, therefore I need to go shopping. So here means therefore. So here is a coordinating conjunction. So I need a comma before so. The fridge is empty, comma. So I need to go shopping. I went shopping so I can fill the fridge with food. So here has more the meaning of so that. I went shopping so that I can fill the fridge with food. So here so is used as a subordinating conjunction. And as such, no comma. So, as said, don't use a comma before subordinating conjunction. You don't need to use a comma before subordinating conjunctions, although sometimes you can see one used before subordinating conjunction, especially when the main clause is very long. But otherwise, we don't usually use a comma before subordinating conjunction. But you do use a comma if the subordinating clause starts your sentence. What do I mean by that? I mentioned subordinating conjunction. The subordinating conjunction starts a clause, a dependent clause. That dependent clause is also called a subordinating clause. It is called a subordinating clause because it is started with a subordinating conjunction. I gave you the example of I am not going out because the weather is awful. But it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, because the weather is awful doesn't have to be at the end. It could actually start our sentence. I could actually say, because of the weather is awful, I am not going out. So our subordinating conjunction here, because the weather is awful, starts a sentence. So when it starts a sentence here, we tend to put a comma after the subordinating clause. So you put a comma after awful. Because the weather is awful, comma. I am not going out. Same thing with when it is cold, comma. Wear warmer clothes. Use a comma after a subordinating clause when it starts the sentence. Having said that, again, a bit of a deception. Having said that, if your subordinating clause is very short, then you could leave it out. It is possible to leave it out when it is very short, but usually we use one. Okay, and sometimes it's even short. It's better to use one because it clarifies your sentence. You can clearly see where your subordinating clause ends when you use a comma at the end of it. Right, our next one is prepositional phrases. What is a prepositional phrase? Earlier, if you remember, I mentioned a noun phrase. I mentioned preposition followed by a noun phrase. For my sister. I have made this cake for my sister. My sister is a noun phrase, for is a preposition. But if you think about it, for my sister is also a single phrase. For my sister is what we call a prepositional phrase because the phrase starts with a preposition. So a prepositional phrase is made of the preposition followed by a noun phrase. That's what we call a prepositional phrase. Now remember, a noun phrase has got to have at its main word, the most important word in a noun phrase is a noun. But then a noun phrase could be made of just one word. When I say, I have made this cake for my sister, I could say, I have made this cake for you. Now, for you is a prepositional phrase, but then you is not a noun. It's actually a pronoun. The pronoun replaces a noun. So because the pronoun replaces a noun, in that situation, for also introduces a pronoun, not just a noun. They are linked. So for you is a prepositional phrase. For your sister is also a prepositional phrase because for introduces here either a pronoun or a noun phrase. Usually, we don't use a comma when the prepositional phrase is at the end of the sentence or in the middle of the sentence. For example, the children were sleeping under the table. The children were sleeping under the table. My prepositional phrase is under the table. Under, preposition, the table, noun phrase. Table is the main word. Table is the most important word in the table. Table is the noun. The table, noun phrase. Under the table, prepositional phrase. So the children were sleeping under the table. We don't need a comma here. But what happens if we use under the table, not at the end, but at the start of the sentence? Under the table, the children were sleeping. Well, we've got two situations. If your phrase is very short, under the table is quite short actually, you don't have to use a comma. But you can use a comma as well. So you can say, under the table, comma, the children were sleeping. And you can say, under the table, the children were sleeping without a comma. It is possible. However, if you use a long phrase, we tend to use a comma because a long phrase is maybe too long. I mean, a short phrase, you can go quickly over it. A long phrase, you may think that you need to have like a pause after it. So, again, with a long phrase, if it is at the end of the sentence, you don't need a comma. So I could say, the train arrived at 9 p.m. on the dot. No comma. But if I start my sentence with a prepositional phrase at 9 p.m. on the dot, then we need a comma after on the dot. At 9 p.m. on the dot, comma. The train arrived. Because at 9 p.m. on the dot is a bit long. So you put a comma after. Having said that, remember commas are there to also clarify the meaning to help the reader read your sentence. Because sometimes, without a comma, the reader will just, follow the sentence and not going to pause. Comma there gets the reader pausing. So what happens if you don't pause? Well, you could have that. Before eating the cat, drank a little. That doesn't make sense. Before eating the cat. Oh no! It's before eating, pause, the cat drank a little. Before eating, the cat drank a little. Now if you don't put a comma there after eating, a reader who doesn't know, what you are writing about, you just read it naturally and just expect something after eating, so we just read, before eating the cat, drank a little. And then the reader realizes, wait a moment, that doesn't make sense. Before eating the cat, drank a little. Oh no, I'm not eating the cat here. It's before eating, comma, the cat drank a little. So that comma after eating makes the reader pause. Before eating, the cat drank a little. So this is an example where the comma really is necessary here, because otherwise you have to read that sentence twice for you to understand it, or for the reader to understand it. Now, let's have a look at non-restrictive, also known as non-essential clauses. Non-restrictive, non-essential, two words to mean the same thing. Now, commas, or shall I say a pair of commas, usually, are used to mark off non-restrictive clauses or non-essential clauses. What do I mean by that? A non-essential clause is a clause that doesn't need to be there. It's just there to add more information, but seriously, if you take it out of your text will make sense without it. For example, I could say, La Paz is the highest capital city in the world. Makes sense on its own? La Paz is the highest capital city in the world. No problem. Makes sense on its own. However, what happens if I decide to add more information about La Paz? Oh, I want to say that it is in Bolivia. Okay. I'm going to insert a clause between la paz and is the highest capital in the world. So La Paz, comma, which is in Bolivia, comma, is the highest capital city in the world. Now I need a pair of commas here between which is in Bolivia to mark off that clause. Because what I'm saying with that pair of commas is which is in Bolivia doesn't need to be there. It's just additional information. It's just optional, just there to give you extra information, but seriously, I can take it out and you will still be happy with that sentence. Let's have a look at another example. Ian Fleming's Bond stories are among the best-selling fictional books of all time. Makes sense on its own here? Ian Fleming's Bond stories are among the best-selling fictional books of all time. But again, I could add additional information that doesn't really need to be there. For example, Ian Fleming's Bond stories are among the best-selling fictional books of all time, comma, having sold over 100 million copies worldwide. Now here, instead of adding my additional information in the middle of the clause, within the clause, I add it at the end of the clause, having sold over 100 million copies worldwide. That's non-essential information, doesn't need to be there, it just adds extra information. I need a comma before having sold over 100 million copies worldwide to again mark off my non-essential clause. Now I mentioned non-essential clause or non-restrictive clause. That means that we also have a restrictive clause or essential clause. So yes, we do have essential clauses as well. Now, an essential clause compared to a non-essential clause has got to be there. I cannot take it out of the text, because if I take it out of the text is not that clear. There is an ambiguity about it. For example, this ball belongs to the girl. Now, does that make perfect sense on its own? You probably are going to ask the girl, which girl? You know, there are many girls in the world. Which one are we talking about? So here, the girl is not defined, and it's lack of information. Which girl are we talking about? Well, if I say this ball belongs to the girl who lives next door, well, that one makes more sense. We have identified the girl we're talking about. So this ball belongs to the girl who lives next door. Who lives next door really needs to be there for my sentence to make sense. It's got to be there, because when I take it out, I'm not sure what you're talking about, which girl we're talking about. You know, next door, in front of the house, or somewhere else. Which one? So, who lives next door? It's got to be there. It is essential. And because it is essential, we don't use commas. Commas are not used with essential clauses compared to non-essential clauses. There's a type of clause that we call that clause. A that clause is a clause introduced by the word that. For example, the cake that is in the oven is for your birthday. Now, when I say the cake that is in the oven is for your birthday, I usually contrast it with something else. I imply something else. When I say the cake that is in the oven is for your birthday, I imply there is another cake somewhere else, but that other cake is not in the oven. So that clause is an essential clause. That clause is an essential clause, and you don't use a comma with that clause. But when I say the cake is for your birthday, the cake is for your birthday makes sense on its own, that's for sure. But if there are two cakes in the house, when you say the cake is for your birthday, you could ask which one. So sometimes you need a context to actually work out if I've got an essential clause or an essential clause. Because without a context, it could make sense. With a context, it may not make sense. So in that context, when I've got two cakes in the kitchen, then that is in the oven is essential. It's got to be there. Because without it, I've got ambiguity. I don't know which one we're talking about, which cake we're talking about. So the cake that is in the oven is for your birthday. You've got an essential clause. But every time you use that, in that clause, that introduces a clause don't use a comma because it is essential. So when you say that the cake that is in the oven is for your birthday, you automatically imply there was another cake somewhere else. So that was essential clauses and non-essential clauses. Right, words in appositions work like non-essential clauses, but we don't call them clauses because they are phrases. They don't have a subject and a verb like clauses, but they work similarly in that they don't need to be there. They can be taken out of the text and still make sense. Let me give you an example to illustrate what I'm saying. 100 Years of Solitude is one of the most famous books of Latin America. Now, I could insert a phrase to add more information about 100 Years of Solitude. 100 Years of Solitude, comma, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's masterpiece, comma, is one of the most famous books of Latin America. Now my phrase here, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's masterpiece, is additional information. Does not really need to be there. Without it, it still makes sense. So it's not really essential to have it here. So we use commas to mark off that non-essential phrase. Another example, simple one. The Prado is a museum in Madrid. Could add some more information by saying the Prado is a museum in Madrid, comma, Spain. By saying the Prado is a museum in Madrid, comma, Spain, I add additional information to say that Madrid is in Spain, but does not really need to be there. If you think about it, these words in appositions, I could use which is before them. I could say 100 Years of Solitude, which is Gabriel Garcia Marquez's masterpiece, is one of the most famous books of Latin America. So if I use which is before Gabriel Garcia Marquez's masterpiece, now I've got a clause. So you can see how these words in apposition, these phrases, and the non-essential clauses are very much linked. Another situation when you use commas, and these, generally speaking, we call them words that are not part of the main structure of the sentence. Words that are not part of the main structure of the sentence means that they don't really need to be there, but they kind of add some kind of flavor to your text. It makes your text flow better, or makes your text more enjoyable. It's just, a bit more spicy. For example, I could say, electric cars are the future. But I could also say, electric cars, I think, are the future. I think gives more nuance to the sentence. Okay, just say, well, that's what I think is my own opinion. Doesn't really need to be there to just add a bit more flavor to the sentence. Because electric cars are the future, makes sense on its own. Electric cars, I think, are the future, gives a bit more of spice to the sentence. Because I disagree. I could be more authentic by saying, no, I disagree. No, I disagree. I could say, the Maya city Chichen Itza is a marvelous sight. The Maya city Chichen Itza is a marvelous sight. Isn't it? So I could add isn't it at the end of my sentence. So we use a comma before isn't it. The Maya city Chichen Itza is a marvelous sight, isn't it? I could say, nice to meet you, or hi, nice to meet you, hi, nice to meet you. So all these words I use, I think, no, isn't it, hi. They don't really need to be there, but they do add some kind of flavor to your sentence. Commas are also used with linking adverbs or phrases. What's a linking adverb or linking phrase? This is explained more fully in my video about simple, compound, and complex sentences. But in a nutshell, linking adverbs link to clauses, however, not in the same way as a conjunction. Conjunctions and linking adverbs are different. The main difference is conjunction always links to clauses and its position is stable. Its position is between two clauses or at the start of a clause. It never changes. So when I say I am wet because I had a shower, because I had a shower, I am wet, because starts my clause. Cannot be moved anywhere. It will always be at the start of that clause. Linking adverb, however, can be moved within a clause. Like however. Because I could say, I am wet. However, I have a towel. Or I am wet. I have a towel, however. So you can see here, however, can be moved at the end of the clause. It doesn't have to be at the start of the clause. So because however can be moved within that clause, then it's not a conjunction. It is a linking adverb. And the other thing is, when I say, I am wet, however, I have a towel, I cannot say, however, I am a towel, I am wet. That doesn't make sense. You can move a subordinating clause that starts with a subordinating conjunction, like because I had a shower. You can say, I am wet because I had a shower, or because I had a shower, I am wet. You can say that. But with the linking adverb, that clause, where the linking adverb is, doesn't move. It stays where it is. It cannot be moved at the start. It's got to be there. So that's why when I say I am wet because I had a shower, here I've got an independent clause, I am wet, and a dependent clause or subordinating clause because I had a shower. But with however, with the linking adverb, I don't have that. I've got two independent clauses. I am wet. However, I have a towel. I am wet can stand on its own. However, I have a towel can stand on its own as well. However, I am wet can stand on its own. That sentence is independent. So I've got two independent clauses here. Two independent clauses side by side, but linked with the word however. So that's a linking adverb, however. And how the punctuation is used here, so I am wet, semicolon, however, comma, I have a towel. Or I am wet, semicolon, I have a towel, comma, however, full stop. Or I am wet, full stop. However, comma, I have a towel. So you can use a full stop instead of a semicolon. You can use a full stop because remember, we have two independent clauses. Which means that if you have two independent clauses side by side, you cannot use a comma between these two independent clauses. So you cannot say, I am wet, comma, however, comma, I have a towel. No, 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 no. I am wet doesn't have a comma after. Because we have two independent clauses. I am wet, full stop, or semicolon, but not comma. Another example. Being organized is a good quality, semicolon. Being late, comma. On the other hand, comma, is not. On the other hand, is a linking phrase. I could say on the other hand first. I could say being organized is a good quality, semicolon. On the other hand, being late is not. On the other hand, comma, being late is not. Could also say Sydney is not the capital of Australia, full stop. In fact, comma, it is Canberra, full stop. I could also say Sydney is not the capital of Australia, full stop. It is, comma, in fact, comma, Canberra. So you can see how, however, on the other hand, and in fact, can be moved within the clause. That's why they are either linking adverbs or linking phrases, but not conjunctions. Our final one regarding commas is commas with direct speech. Commas with direct speech. How do we use them? Now let's use Jane Austen's Emma, a book that she wrote, Emma. No, comma. He said, comma, smiling, comma, that is no subject of regret at all. Now in that direct speech here, I've got actually the direct speech, no, that is no subject of regret at all. But within, no, that is not subject of regret at all, I have inserted or Jane Austen, rather, inserted, he said, smiling. So, because of these 3 words, he said smiling, that's inserted within the speech, then we use a comma after no, comma, he said, comma, smiling, comma, that is no subject of regret at all. Emma said, comma, but you will come again. Emma said, comma, but you will come again. After said, we usually put a comma. Having said that, you could see some publishing houses that actually starting saying that it's superfluous, we don't really need a comma there. So that use could be changed again in the future. Maybe at some point in the future, we will say we don't need a comma there. But at the moment, most people say we need a comma. Emma said, comma. But you will come again. Do note that instead of a comma, you could have a colon here. I am annoyed, comma, Frank declared. So in I am annoyed, comma, Frank declared, we usually use a comma there. However, if it ends with a question mark or an exclamation mark, then we wouldn't use a comma. So when I say, what is the matter? Question mark, said she. I don't need to use commas. It's not usual to use 2 punctuation marks side by side, except with quotation marks, because the quotation marks need to be there to show when your quotation starts and when it ends. But otherwise, we don't really use 2 punctuation marks side by side. So, what is the matter? Question mark. No need of commas. To finish this video, I'm now going to go through some common mistakes that people make with the use of commas. Now, the most common mistake with commas is using a comma rather than a full stop. That's very common. You need to use a full stop if you've got side by side 2 independent clauses, not a comma. A comma does not separate 2 independent clauses, unless these independent clauses are linked by a conjunction. That's a different situation. If you link with a conjunction, like a coordinating conjunction, then yes, you use a comma before. But if we don't have a coordinating conjunction, then you don't use a comma, you would use a full stop, sometimes semicolon. For example, India is the largest producer of films in terms of quantity. It has, however, few film screens compared to other major film producers. A lot of people tend to put a comma before it has here. A lot of people put a comma after quantity. India is the largest producer of films in terms of quantity, comma, it has, comma, however, comma, few film screens compared to other major film producers. Now the comma between however is correct. The comma before it has is not. It's got to be a full stop here because we've got 2 independent clauses. We've got the clause India is the largest producer of films in terms of quantity. That can stand on its own, it makes sense. We also have it has, however, few film screens compared to other major film producers. That can stand on its own as well. We've got 2 independent clauses here. So it's got to be linked by either a semicolon or a full stop, but not a comma. Another common mistake is separating the subject from the verb. Right. That usually happens when the subject is very long. It is so long that people sometimes think that, oh, I have to pause here. But actually, no, you shouldn't use a comma. We shouldn't use a comma to separate the subject from the verb unless you insert a non-essential clause between the subject and the verb. For example, the 3 movies that have won 11 Oscars, comma, are The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Titanic, and Ben-Hur. The comma after 11 Oscars is incorrect. That shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be there. We shouldn't have a comma there. The subject of the sentence is the 3 movies that have won 11 Oscars. The verb is are. You shouldn't put a comma before the verb or between the subject and the verb. So no commas in the 3 movies that have won 11 Oscars are The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, comma, Titanic, and Ben-Hur. So we don't need a comma after The Return of the King because here we've got a list of 3 movies. But we don't need a comma before are. It is different if you insert a non-insertion clause, as I mentioned earlier. For example, the 3 movies that have won 11 Oscars, comma, all of them American, comma, are The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Titanic, and Ben-Hur. So here, all of them American it's not really a non-essential clause because it's not a clause, but it is a non-essential phrase, words in apposition if you want. Not essential here can be removed, so because it's not essential, it needs to be marked off by the pair of commas. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and good luck with your commas. Thank you.